This week on Quality Digest Live, are registrars offering transparency to medical device manufacturers selling in Europe?
Plus, we chat with Kari Miller of Pilgrim Software about measuring what you're managing. That and more when we come back.
Welcome back to Quality Digest Live for January 18th, 2013. QDL is your weekly look at who and what is making the news in the world of quality. I'm Mike Richmond, publisher of Quality Digest.
And I'm Quality Digest editor-in-chief, Dirk Ducharme. You know, in a recent press release from the Association for Advancing Automation, A3, a global advocate for the automation industry, the association said that they were disappointed in how CBS News' 60 Minutes portrayed the industry in a segment called March of the Machines. That segment discussed the dramatic rise of automation and robotics in the workplace. The association felt that 60 Minutes' focus on how implementation of these automation technologies eliminates jobs could not be more wrong, and this was according to A3 President Jeff Bernstein. Just to set the tone, here's a clip from the piece where 60 Minutes host Morley Safer is speaking to MIT professors Eric Brynjolfsson and Andrew McAfee.
Now they're finally here, but instead of serving us, we find them competing for our jobs. And according to MIT professors Eric Brynjolfsson and Andrew McAfee, one of the reasons for the jobless recovery.
Our economy is bigger than it was before the start of the Great Recession. Corporate profits are back. Business investment in hardware and software is back higher than it's ever been. What's not back is the jobs.
And you think technology and increased automation is a factor in that?
Absolutely.
So, at least when Brynjolfsson and McAfee are speaking, that's the message. Automation is affecting job growth. And in fact, later on, Brynjolfsson says that while technology is always creating and destroying jobs, and those were his words, destroying, right now it is actually doing more of the latter. So, obviously, A3 wasn't happy with this message, and they point out that 60 Minutes didn't include examples provided to them by A3 that show that American companies have in fact used automation to become stronger global competitors, and according to Bernstein, this has allowed these companies to save and create more jobs while producing higher quality and lower cost products, rather than closing up shop or sending the jobs overseas. So Brynjolfsson and McAfee don't say that we should get rid of automation. That isn't their point. The question they ask is, how do we deal with the issue? And personally, I think actually it isn't an issue. This has been going on one way or another since really the dawn of time. I mean, Brynjolfsson makes a good point. Because of technology, we're always kind of creating and, excuse me, my comm set is screaming in my ear. Brynjolfsson is saying that there's always, jobs being created and jobs being lost due to technology. It's always been that case, and what happens is there is a lag. I mean, there may be short-term losses, but in the long term, my feeling is it doesn't have any effect. You just have people who come out of college with different skills and picking up, or vocational schools or whatever, and going into those new types of technologies that are now available that weren't available before. I don't think it's an issue.
Yeah. Well, we also had another article this week, news item this week, that talked about how we can get along. Robots and humans can work well together, and how it doesn't necessarily have to destroy jobs and reduce jobs. It just, those jobs kind of shift, and the human piece of that becomes not so much just production, but becomes more theoretical, or becomes more on the management side. So there's ways of dealing with it, and I think that this is good. This is an interesting piece. And it's something that I think is always in the minds of people in manufacturing, is how you deal with this.
And I think there's always this issue of anytime you have anything that affects jobs, whether it's shipping jobs overseas, or whether it's automation, people immediately get really worried. But I don't. In my opinion, it eventually actually levels out. That's my own feeling.
It's an emotional issue, so
it is.
I understand why that happens. Okay, great. Thanks, Dirk. Okay. Well, also in the news this week, MIT News reports that prizes are an effective means of spurring broad-based innovation. These findings appeared in an article running in the excellent MIT News website. Really, really great MIT News website. We get a lot of stuff.
Get a lot of stuff from there. Good
really,
stuff.
Really good stuff. Okay. The piece presented a case study of the Progressive Insurance Automotive X Prize, or PIAXP. No, I don't think that's what they say. But the PIAXP prize, which was announced in late 2009, offered $10 million in prize monies for teams that designed clean vehicles that could reach a fuel efficiency equaling 100 miles per gallon. The vehicles also needed to be able to be manufactured on a commercial scale, so there was a practical aspect to the contest, which is good. An analysis of this particular contest found that it maximized effort, not efficiency. Interesting. Maximized effort did not maximize necessarily efficiency. More than 100 teams entered, and together they spent far more than $10 million in developing their designs. So obviously there's a lot of rather inefficient duplication of effort, but again, the point of the contest, and with all contests with large prizes such as this, is to generate the greatest number of ideas. So again, it's more about the in number of different approaches to the problem, rather than efficiency, okay, in doing that, because you're gathering a lot of people and you're offering them a prize. Now, the story, of course, is interesting in and of itself, but when Dirk and I read it, the same thought came into our minds. This is pay for performance, is it not?
Exactly. It's but from a different, for innovation, so to speak. Yeah.
For innovation, but it's pay for performance. And it ties in very nicely with a story that we covered last week on the show. We covered last week in QDD and on the show, which drew some really interesting comments. I'm speaking, of course, about Trip Babbitt's piece, Pay for Performance Systems Still Destroying Quality.
Which most people, well, actually, I think everybody except for maybe me, agreed with Trip on his point of view.
I think there was I mean, the comments certainly ran in Trip's favor, but I think that there was a lot of compelling arguments on both sides. I mean, Trip made a compelling argument in his article that pay for performance just doesn't work. It subverts quality, and it takes away the focus on customer service. Now, you and I presented some contrary viewpoints in the show, and that sparked some interesting responses, and also provided that quality occasionally makes for some interesting and odd bedfellows. I want to run, if we could now, some of the quotes that we had. This is from Trip Babbitt. And he responded to.
By the way, let me set this up a little bit. I had written in the comments section that because there was some back and forth, and then I wrote in the comments section as an example. I said, well, you know, if you have two salespeople and you pay them exactly the same, but you have one that is an exemplary performer, isn't that going to be a disincentive for the excellent salesperson? To sell more, because why should they bother? They're getting paid next to a lackluster salesperson, and this is kind of, I believe this is Tripp's response.
This is what Tripp responded to that, which was good. Is the question is, why is one salesperson performing better than another or others? Does a salesperson have a better method? And if he or she does have a better method, would they share the better method with others or keep it to themselves to continue to receive the reward? Unfortunately, I see manipulation by salespeople in my personal and professional experience. Very rarely do I truly find a better method. If a salesperson discovers a better method, they should be rewarded and recognized, as long as sharing the new method with others is part of the outcome. The real question is why someone is better. My point in Demings is that it's not down to the individual. And he's referencing there, I think, really the Demings red bead experiment, where you're looking at is it the system or is it the person within the system that's affecting the quality of the outcome?
Right.
And so he's really arguing very, very powerfully there for this idea that, again, as he wrote, pay for performance doesn't work. It subverts quality. And I referenced the odd bedfellows, and we had another quote in this piece, which I want to run now.
From Mark Graban. For those of you who aren't familiar, Mark Graban and Trip Babbitt often go head-to-head on some topics because they come at their respective fields from pretty divergent viewpoints.
They've been frequent jousting partners professionally.
But they agree.
But this one they agree, which was fascinating. Trip and I, Mark Graban writes, Trip and I often disagree, but I am 100% with him on this one. I'm upset with the pay-for-performance trend in healthcare, which is causing a great deal of dysfunction and unintended consequences. It oversimplifies complex system issues to punish doctors for system performance. The trend toward rewarding doctors for patient satisfaction is leading to worse care because doctors are afraid to say no to patients now.
Right, and they both made really good points.
Yes.
I mean, I still tend I look at it from a different perspective. I still tend to stand by what my beliefs are, but they made really good points. I mean, actually, both Tripp and Mark maybe kind of go, okay, well,
yeah.
There's some good points there. But
there are some good points there, and the whole pay for performance thing in healthcare is a whole another huge can of worms.
Right.
That is it's a good attempt at trying to improve the system.
But I really appreciated Tripp's ideas. Like, look, if you have two people and one's outperforming the other, find out why.
What are they doing different? And share it with the group, because you ultimately want to improve the whole organization, not just benefit the one individual who might be incentivized to game the system a little bit to get more money. So good piece there by Tripp, and a good piece, of course, by MIT News that kind of brought that to our attention too.
Okay, well, if you are a medical device manufacturer doing business in Europe, this next story is for you. In both the United States and Europe, medical devices must be tested to ensure certain essential requirements in terms of safety and effectiveness. That's the law. This testing is typically done by what are called, typically done by testing labs, and then those test results are, let's say, certified, for lack of a better word, by notified bodies. And notified bodies are similar to registrars, for those of you who are familiar with, let's say, ISO 9001. And there are a variety of standards to which notified bodies can test to or certify to, but for medical device safety, products are tested typically to IEC 60601-1, otherwise known as Medical Equipment, Medical Electrical Equipment, Part 1, General Requirements for Basic Safety and Essential Performance.
Easy for you to say.
In Europe, the European Commission does not require that a product be tested to any particular standard, only that it meets the essential safety requirements. Just the same, most notified bodies and device manufacturers test to 60601. But, and here's the function, where we're going today, what happens if, as a medical device manufacturer, you decide that you don't want to be tested to that standard? Well, here to talk about that issue is our guest, Grant Ramaley, Director of Regulatory Affairs for Aseptico. Hello, Grant. How are you doing this morning?
Well, thank you, Dirk. Nice to be on the show.
Great. Well, okay. So, as I understand, this problem that I just mentioned kind of raised its head when 60601, third revision, that's the newest revision, came out. And I believe you said that your notified body told you that it was mandatory that you retest to that standard. Now, just to set the stage here, your company's products had already been tested and found safe and effective based on an earlier version of that standard. So there was no question that your product had been tested. It's been out in the field for a long time. Now there's just a newer version of 60601, and your notified body is telling your company, if I understand right, that, hey, you have to retest. Do I have that right?
Yeah, that's true. That's absolutely right.
Okay, so there seems to be some confusion amongst notified bodies in what a voluntary standard is. So explain what it means to have a product tested to a voluntary standard.
Well, I just wanted to look into this a little more. And, when you talk about private law versus public law is, of course, the laws of the land, the code of federal regulation, and that sort of thing. Private laws are those things that we agree between organizations. So I can agree to use a standard like ISO, IEC, or I can agree not to. It's not a law, a public law, that I comply with that. The laws for CE marking, those are public laws, so we have to meet those. And those public laws say that standards drawn up by private law bodies are not mandatory.
So just to clarify here, what we're saying is that in Europe, if you're going to sell talking about Europe, if you're going to sell a medical device product in Europe, at some point it has to get a CE mark, right?
Absolutely.
And that CE mark is given to a medical device company by the notified body, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. So they kind of hold the reins in terms of whether you can sell your product in Europe or not.
Absolutely.
Okay. So there's this voluntary standard, 60601. A new version comes out, and the notified bodies, from what I understand, are certain notified bodies, I'm not sure all of them are doing, but certain notified bodies are telling their clients, look, there's this new standard, third edition of 60601, you must be retested to that. And what happens, what are the notified bodies saying will happen if they don't retest to that?
Well, they can agree to withhold their CE mark and force the manufacturer to go look someplace else that doesn't require conformity with a particular standard. So that is a choice that the manufacturer has with regard to CE marking. So it's somewhat of a voluntary arrangement between the manufacturer and their notified body as to whether they're going to agree to those kinds of terms.
And it's your position that this is totally wrong, and in fact, the European Commission, who oversees the medical device directive, which is basically the law in Europe. Do I have that right?
That's correct.
And they disagree with the position of the notified bodies?
Yes.
Tell me a little bit about that.
Well, I mean, a lot of the manufacturers that have had products on the market for quite a long time, one I've talked to that had their product on the market for 20 years, and it's a very unique device. There's no alternative to it. In every way, it's the state of the art. It wasn't going to be available anymore in Europe because their notified body had demanded that they apply this new standard at an extraordinary cost of retesting that they just couldn't afford. So they were going to elect not to place that product on the market in Europe anymore. And they contacted the European Union, and the European Union told them to fire the notified body. There are other ways to go about meeting the essential requirements, and I assisted him a little bit in finding some help so that he could avoid having to the expense of retesting the third edition and keep that product on the market where the doctors can still use it.
Grant, you mentioned the term state-of-the-art there, and I think that's part of what's happening here is there's maybe a little bit of confusion, or there's not a lot of clarity maybe in terms of what state-of-the-art means. I mean, the notified bodies could look at this and say, well, you need to retest or recertify because we need to ensure that the products coming into Europe are state-of-the-art. Would that be an argument that the notified bodies perhaps would make?
Well, that is the argument that they're using, and it's a legal requirement in Annex 1, Paragraph 2 of the Medical Device Directive 9342 EEC that the product meets state-of-the-art in terms of safety and whatnot. So, when you look at how it is that manufacturer decides to meet that state-of-the-art requirement, of course, there's no requirement to meet a particular standard. And they just need to address that requirement. The notified bodies have more narrowly defined state-of-the-art as being attached to compliance with later versions of standards, of the voluntary standards that emerge for availability. And of course, that's something that the regulators don't agree with, because the regulators got together and the Global Harmonization Task Force and wrote a very concise document explaining the role of standards in conformity assessment, and very plainly said that there are many different alternatives to using voluntary standards, and that products that have been on the market and safe and effective for quite a long time don't need to be retested to those new standards.
Grant, we're getting short on time here, but tell us briefly, if you will, kind of what you're kind of going through this whole thing in this back and forth with your notified body. Kind of tell us briefly the history of what's going on with you regarding this quote requirement from your notified body that you have to meet the latest edition.
Yeah, we came in and we faced the same situation. I had been talking to our notified body a couple of years before about some concerns I had about the third edition's ability to actually satisfy the legal requirements. And so we elected to use, as we have been in the past, several standards. We use about 5 different harmonized standards to meet the essential requirements. And when they came in, they saw that we didn't apply the third edition, and they wrote us up a critical nonconformity for not meeting the requirement for state-of-the-art. And at the same time, I forwarded it on to the European Commission, and they complained to the notified body on my behalf.
So you actually contacted, who was it at the European Commission?
Manfred Kohler.
And what's his position?
He's the Directorate General of the European Commission over the health and that department there that covers medical devices.
So basically he's the guy at the European Commission who oversees this kind of stuff.
Yes, and they had already been looking at 60601 third edition and finding some problems with it. So this just added to the complications that they were having with regard to that standard.
Okay, so you contacted Manfred Kohler, and what did he do?
No, he contacted the notified body and says you can't require the manufacturers meet these standards because the standards are voluntary standards. So that's what I was told by Manfred. He had told them, and of course he just reiterated the position of the European Commission and especially with the notified bodies, that they cannot force manufacturers to apply newer versions of the standard to meet the legal requirements for state-of-the-art. It's too narrow of a position that they don't agree with.
Okay. Well, Grant, we're actually out of time here. This is actually really interesting. I think we're going to keep following up on this with you in terms of what's going on. But the upshot is what you're saying is basically a company could do what you do, is if you believe your notified body is telling you to, that they're requiring you to retest to a certain standard, you can either go to another notified body or you can duke it out with them referring to this information from the European Commission, Manfred Kohler.
That's true.
Okay. Well, Grant, thanks for joining us. Sorry we have to cut it short, but we'll hook up with you again.
All right. Thank you very much, Dirk.
Okay. Thanks, Grant.
Thanks, Grant. Good stuff. Interesting.
Yeah, it is. It's pretty fascinating.
Boy, it's an interesting issue, and it's one that I think it's important that we cover. And I'm glad that Grant kind of raised it with us.
Right. It's something we'll stay on top of because it's kind of there's actually several things going on with accreditation and medical device requirements and so forth in Europe. Not so much, I don't think, in the States, although a certain amount of what he's talking about actually is true in the States as well.
Good stuff. All right, thanks, Grant. Okay, well, I want to get to a story now, Dirk, which was a really good one that we ran this week in Quality Digest Daily, called "When Stories Work Better Than Facts," which was by Robert Wilson. That appeared in Wednesday's issue. And Robert Wilson is a guy who's been writing for us for a little while. I don't think we've ever featured him here on QDL, however, though. He's got a really nice style. Robert's got a very nice...
it's kind of down-to-earth, touchy-feely...
homey, human style, human approach to quality improvement and working within organizations.
And motivation.
And motivation, Good stuff from him. Well, what Robert talked about in this article was sales. And he talked about sales from the perspective of making sure that you cover all the sales accounts in your territory and give them equal hearing. And he talked about it from the perspective of a gig that he got as a consultant, working with the sales manager with his sales team. And the sales manager's sales team didn't want to deal with the small accounts. They only wanted to deal with their large accounts, right? Because that's where the big bucks are, the profits are, where the commissions are. Right. For these salespeople is to work the big accounts. But yet, for the organization itself, they realized that a high percentage of their volume came from the small fries, from the little accounts. So they're trying to convince their salespeople to work the small accounts too. So Robert Wilson was brought in to try to help motivate the salespeople to work all the accounts, not just the big ones. And he kind of tried to look at it logically and look at the data and say, hey, this is the percentage, this is how much more commissions you can make. Nothing was getting any traction, as it turned out. So what he resorted to finally was to tell a story from his own history. He told a story about when he was a salesperson working in I believe it was the garment trade, I think it was.
Yeah, garment trade. Textiles,
trade, textiles. Yeah. And he had an account that came to him at a trade show, I believe it was, and a single woman operator. Seemed like a very small account. He actually ended up visiting her in her store, and it was teeny little store. And he was all bummed out because he figured, this is going to be a lot of work. And it turned out it was a lot of work. This one woman demanded a lot of time. She demanded a lot of effort, a lot of focused attention from him. And he's kind of like, he's thinking it's kind of a hassle, but he's giving her good customer service. He's really focusing on her needs. He's listening to her. He's addressing what her concerns are. He's giving her really, really good service, even though he knows it's not probably going to pay off very well. Well, moral of the story, surprise, surprise. Turns out she's a maven. She's got a huge amount of accounts, and she ends up giving him the biggest order he ever got. So the moral of his story, which he told to his team that he was working with, was you never know. You never know when a small account's going to graduate into a big account, so give them all an equal amount of effort, right? What he's talking about here is that you need to connect to your people from an emotional perspective. You need to tell them stories sometimes rather than give them data if you want to motivate and persuade them to do something, right? I mean, that's an important one. It also ties in with what we just talked about earlier in the show about paying for performance. Right. I mean, you need to give everybody good customer service. You can't be focused necessarily on just where the money is as a salesperson.
And I think that was Tripp's point is if people are totally focused on I've got to, I'm going to ignore my small accounts because there's no money in that for me, so I've got to go to these big accounts because that's where I'm going to make my, then that you would you might pass over somebody who might actually end up being a big account.
Who might end up being a big account. So give them all good customer service. Do your due diligence, do your work, and connect with your people emotionally too, and inspire them to do their best work. That was really the point of this.
Right.
Really nice, that's really cute article, and Robert has a lot of good articles like that, so check that one out.
Great. Well, you know, our final article this week is an article called What Gets Measured Also Gets Managed, which ran in Tuesday's issue of QDD.
Of QDD, that's right. And the article comes to us from Kari Miller, and Kari is the Senior Director of Industry Solutions and Product Management for Pilgrim Software. It's a very nicely written piece, and it talks in practical terms about how a laser focus on process improvement leads to a quality of culture within an organization. And besides, anybody who can quote Gandhi and Philip Crosby within the same article, she's singing my song.
There you go.
I love that. Okay, so we're going to delve a little more deeply into these issues, and to do so, I'd like to welcome back to the show Kari Miller of Pilgrim Software. Hello, Kari.
Hello, how are you?
We're doing very well, thank you. Thank you for joining us again, Kari. We had you on the show, I believe, a couple of months ago, or early in 2012, and we had a nice time with you, so we wanted to bring you back and chat a little bit more about what you perceive about quality and improvement in organizations. I want to jump into it. You talk first about teamwork as a real key to quality improvement. So what are some of the things in your perspective that good team members do to improve quality in their organizations, even if it means going beyond their normal operating procedures or normal work job instructions?
Sure. So let's start with the definition of teamwork, right? It's a cooperative effort by a group of people to achieve a common goal. So the common goal is the first thing that everybody has to have to be a team. And to go beyond a standard operating procedure, you have to know what that is. And basically, that's just it's something that's written, it's encoded, that helps employees do a particular task. It helps them be successful at it. Its whole purpose is to create consistency and predictability in a process. But that really brings us to the heart of your question, and that is, if an organization's embraced a culture of quality, continuous improvement is a given, and continuous is the key word here. Change occurs quickly, and it introduces variability and elements of unpredictability in the process. The team members must be willing and able to report and respond to that variability, and the organization must have processes and channels implemented for them to do that with. So that requires tools as well. Giving this open communication, by the way, to employees is very important. But that's the key is this: because you have change, because you have variability, because you have predictability or unpredictability, you need to start anticipating what's going to happen before it happens, and that's the tricky thing. So making sure that everyone is fully engaged goes well beyond what can be encoded in an SOP.
You talk about teamwork, and you talk nicely about it, thank you. But teamwork is more than just the people within the organization. And talk about maybe how you spread a culture of quality to your suppliers, to your customers. How do you work across just your organization with those others that you work with?
Absolutely. And having a culture of quality does have to go across your entire value chain, and that, of course, includes suppliers, which you intimate. In a culture of quality, there is no such thing as an intermittent problem. In a culture of quality, we understand that every problem, every defect has a root cause, that all of those things are preventable, and that, it's better to prevent things than to have to correct them after the fact. So bringing your suppliers and everyone in your value chain, that includes your customers, into the culture of quality with you, looking at processes and working in a continuous improvement, with a continuous improvement methodology is critical, because just let's take a supplier example. If they choose to change something in their product that, to them looks like it doesn't change form, fit, or function at all, it could very much impact your processes without them even knowing it. So making sure that there's that open communication, that dedication to figuring out the root cause of any problem or defect is going to be critical for any organization if they really want to take that unpredictability out of their environment.
Well, I think that's well said, and to me that comes down to data. And my question always is, you know, you can sometimes have data overload. You know, there's a lot of data in an enterprise, in a wide, far-flung organization. So how do you, as Duran put it, how do you kind of separate out the vital few from the useful many when you're looking at data points?
Yeah, that's a good point. You know, information is key to quality, no matter what industry that you're in. And it's particularly important that in industries where variability is the norm, especially when you're dealing with chemicals or pharmaceuticals or something like that. But I actually take a little bit different approach to this than some people do, because quite frankly, while there are a few things that you should always measure, like cost of quality, both good and bad, like, you know, on-time shipments, those sorts of things that we're all familiar with, where I vary is I think for you to really get to the vital few that are important here and now, you have to define the many. So I think you up front need to look at all of the metrics that you need to watch in your organization based on, you know, whatever you produce, what your processes look like. And then you also have to at the same time establish thresholds and alerts so that as you get circumstances that are trending towards a problem, you're alerted to those things ahead of time, and then those become the key metrics that you focus on. You know, goes to that old saying, you know, don't fix what isn't broke, right? So go ahead and by the way, there's others that would tell you, you know, go ahead and break it then, right? Because you've got to do that as well. But my point is that you can drown yourself if you're watching those processes too closely that are running smoothly. So if you define all your metrics and you define those thresholds and alerts to make sure that you don't miss anything critical, you can stay very focused without losing sight of the overall operation.
Well, I like that. I like that idea of understanding. You need to understand the many to really understand what the few are, and that's
Yes.
a really well said point. We got to wrap it up here, Kari. But before I let you go, I want to just ask you, what do you see as something we need to look out for as 2013? The spirit of risk assessment and preparation. What do quality managers need to be looking out for, do you think, in 2013, this year coming up in the next 12 months?
Sure, and there's probably no surprise in this answer. And, you know, in the next 12 months, the two things that they very likely know are going to happen is that regulations are going to continue to increase, and compliance reporting requirements are going to continue to grow in complexity. And just for example, ISO 9000 2008 is anticipated to focus on elements of risk and effectiveness training. The second is that the pace of change is going to continue to increase, multiplying the risk within the organization. So you have to be aware of those things. And part of the reason that change and the rate of change has happened so quickly is because data is available everywhere these days. Our consumers are much more informed. They know what their choices are, and they know what they can and can put up with and shouldn't put up with, if you will. So you've got to really focus the organization on change management. It's going to play a heightened role in any organization in the months to come. And that's also going to require broadening organizational participation in activities that are traditionally considered quality activities. So really kind of opening up that net, if you will, to bring the whole organization into monitoring change and managing risk is going to be really critical to the success of any organization.
Okay, well, thank you, Kari. We got to kind of wrap it up right now, but thank you for joining us on the show. And that's Kari Miller from Pilgrim Software. And as Kari, as you pointed out, risk management is the big topic going forward, I think.
Absolutely.
Okay, well, thank you for joining us.
Thanks, Kari. We'll talk to you soon.
Thanks.
All right. Okay, well, that is the end of our show. But before we go, just a reminder for all of you gearheads, tech heads, and people who use gauges. We do have a live program coming up at the end of the month, January 31st, called Gauging Quality. This is a live half-hour program with CPM Labs President and CEO Craig Howell. And this is a live show that is going to deal this time with surface plates, calibrating surface plates, all about surface plates, how you calibrate surface plates. It's a live show. Be sure to join us. You'll be getting an email on this, a blast here
next
coming
week.
up pretty soon.
Yep.
In case you miss it, it's going to be January 31st. I guess gauging. We have a new URL for it. It won't be on this channel, but it'll be a different channel.
You'll hear about it.
Yeah, you'll see it in your newsletter as well. We'll hype it in the newsletter as well. But if you're interested in gauging, it doesn't have to be about surface plates. If you have a question, it's a live show. Send your questions to qdl@qualitydigest.com, and we will answer them live on the show. But basically, it's all about surface plates.
This first episode, that's right.
Big show about big rock.
Look out for that on the 31st of January at 11 a.m. Pacific, 2 p.m. Eastern. Okay,
That's right.
Well, that's our show for the week. Thank you all for joining us. Thank you to Grant Ramaley,
yep.
and Kari Miller of Pilgrim Software for joining us on the show today. And thank you all for being there too. We'll see you next week here on QDL, and we'll see you Monday with another week of QDD.
There you go. So long.
Bye.
Thank you.